Hi, I'm Chef Nicholas Lodge and welcome to this first of 3 YouTube videos based on CookieCon 2022 in Reno, Nevada. These videos have been made just to sort of help you remember everything that I showed in my demonstrations on the booth, and for those of you that sadly couldn't attend CookieCon, gives you a little insight into what I was doing at CookieCon this year. So let's get started. Now, first of all, if you go to nicholaslodge.com and click on recipes and templates, there you'll find an actual download for CookieCon 2022. And this has got recipes, it has tips, tricks, and also instructions for all of the things I'm going to show in all 3 videos, all right? So this one download is all you need to go along with the 3 videos that you will hopefully watch. And so first of all, in the little introduction on the obviously download, it talks about that there are there are 2 recipes I developed specifically for CookieCon 2022, and these cookie recipes have been developed to use with my Flour Pro. These are some of my Flour Pro. So at CookieCon 2021 in Orlando and Dallas, I showed my rustic cookies. So I was showing my rustic log slice cookies, all right, because obviously we were getting towards sort of fall and Christmas time, and there is a separate YouTube video. So if you go to my obviously YouTube channel you're on now and look for rustic cookies, that's where you're going to find this video to show how to use the log slice. And if you've already seen that, this is pretty much the same concept, but I have developed 2 brand new recipes. So these are some of my Flour Pro, which are manufactured by KatieSueDesigns.com in the UK. And these are Katie Sue molds. So one of the ones I will be showing at CookieCon Reno is this beautiful vintage frame. And I will be doing these sort of frame cookies. So I'll be doing these lovely cookies here in the sort of vintage, so like a whitewash. You think of like shabby chic and that sort of whitewash effect. And I'm going to be showing these frames at CookieCon, and I'm going to be showing you how to make them in this video as well. Now, so I have used over the years, obviously Flour Pro has been around for 5 years, so over the years I have used my Flour Pro molds, but specifically I started using them last year, and as I did the log slice. And so when I made the log slice I show on the video on the rustic cookies, this is a gingerbread cookie, all right? So I just took a standard recipe I use for gingerbread men and cookies, rollout cookies, and what I did is I just tightened it up with about 50 grams, about 2 ounces of extra flour, and that just tightened up the dough. So most doughs that you have for cookies, if you generally do mostly roll out and cut cookies, most of those are going to be okay, but some of them will be a little soft, all right? So generally you just want to try one out, see how it works. If you get distortion or loses its shape, it means your dough needs to be tightened up a little bit. So add an extra 25 grams or 50 grams of flour. That will tighten up the dough and will make it suitable to use in the mold. The 2 recipes that are on this download that you're going to print off, they are specifically designed for using in the Flour Pro and also the Katie Sue molds, all right? So there are 2 recipes, all right? So I'm going to talk about the recipes first of all, and a little bit about the ingredients, a little bit more sort of technical things. So the 2 recipes here are going to be, as I said, the first one is the French honey cookie. All right, so this is a really nice like shortbread color, butter cookie, sugar cookie color, and as I said, this recipe is a sort of based on a European recipe, and I've obviously developed this, changed it around a little bit. And but this is a cooked gingerbread, all right, or cookie dough. In Europe, like for example in Germany, in parts of the Scandinavia, so in Sweden and places like that, a lot of cookies are done as a cooked cookie dough, all right? This is not so popular in the US, but as I said, it gives you an option for a few reasons. First of all, you don't need a heavy-duty stand mixer. This is something that's very easy to do with a family. Even on a camping trip, you could make some cookie dough, and as I said, you really don't need a lot of equipment and things, just obviously a stove or a fire to cook the cookie dough on. And but as I said, this is good for those of you that maybe don't have a stand mixer or live in an apartment, and it's an easy dough to make, and as I said, it keeps very well, and as I said, you can make obviously the recipe, or you could double the recipe very, very easily. And this makes this nice, as I said, sort of shortbread, sugar cookie color dough. Now, the recipe for the, so it talks about here that it's a heavy duty, you don't need the heavy duty stand mixer. And the dough, also the other advantage of it is you just have to let the dough cool, and which talks about in the recipe, and then once you've made it, you cool it for about 30 minutes to an hour on your countertop, wrapped in plastic wrap, and you're then ready to use it. So you don't have to let it chill or anything like that. So it's really, really convenient, easy to make, and as I said, it works wonderful in the Flour Pro and the Katie Sue molds, all right? So the recipe, first of all, we use 75 grams of granulated superfine, which is caster sugar. Now, growing up in England, so here in the US, you can go in the grocery store and online on Amazon and things, you can buy superfine sugar. Now, superfine sugar basically is like a fine particle of granulated sugar. And so in England, we call this caster sugar. All right, and so if you watch the Great British Bake Off or a lot of those shows on TV, you will see the word or the ingredient caster sugar used in a lot of baking. So I like to use this when I bake, all right, and especially when I'm making certain things. And in the case of the cookie dough, using this first recipe, because it is a cooked one, the sugar is going to dissolve. So it doesn't really matter whether you use regular granulated sugar or, as I said, you use a superfine or caster sugar, as we call it in the UK. All right, and there's also other sugars. You can use raw sugar as well, and unbleached sugar. So as I said, but because this is actually cooked, that's not such an issue. In the chocolate cookie dough, this is what I recommend to use in your cookie dough, because like when we make, for example, in my world of cake decorating, when we make, for example, rolled fondant, and we're making gum paste from scratch, we generally use 10x powdered sugar. 10x powdered sugar means it's actually 10 times. X stands for number of times it's sifted. Whereas when you buy regular powdered sugar, it doesn't say on the package, but regular powdered sugar is only actually 6x, all right? It's sifted 6 times during manufacturing process. So using, for example, 10x sugar for making royal icing, especially when I'm doing teaching classes and I'm using 0 and 00 piping tips, or nozzles as we call them in England, it means you don't have, your icing is not gritty. When using 10x sugar to make, for example, gum paste or fondant, it means the texture is going to be more porcelain-like. It's not going to be so rough, more like clay that you would get with regular powdered sugar. So this is very, very much similar, granulated sugar. So this is a finer version of granulated sugar. But as I said, so in the recipe here, so we have, as I said, 75 grams. Now, being a pastry chef, I do everything in scaled weight. I really use teaspoons and half teaspoon, quarter teaspoon measures for things like vanilla and things like that. But when you're ever doing a recipe, you always want to scale everything out. Using a cup is not an accurate way to use for sugar or flour or things, because if you were to go and buy, for example, 4 different measuring cups, the 1 cup measure, and you fill them all with water, they'll all be a different amount, because obviously it depends on where they're manufactured. They also depends on what material, whether it's metal or whether it's plastic. So they do vary a lot, as I said. So you're fine for using a teaspoon measure for your, as I said, the vanilla and things like that. But generally when you're doing your butter, your sugar, your flour and things, you always want to use a digital scale. And I will show you a little digital scale more in the video number 2, which is on the vintage chic cookies. Now, so anyway, we take 75 grams of sugar. You want to put that into saucepan. Now, generally speaking, I would use, I use mainly an induction burner or induction stove, but I use a sort of fairly large saucepan, but something not too deep. So a sort of more of a shallow. This makes it easier because when we have got mashed sugar and butter and everything melted, we're going to put the butter in there, and then we're going to add the flour to this. So you need something that's easy to sort of stir and distribute the flour through the cookie dough. All right. But anyway, so you're going to put in your, so 75 grams of sugar. So I've got granulated superfine caster sugar in parentheses, or raw unbleached sugar. Okay, then we add 3 tablespoons of honey. You can use lavender honey, wildflower honey, acacia, clover honey, and generally you want to use a pourable honey, not a set honey. A set honey is the ones that are more opaque and cloudy looking. You want to use a pourable honey, and of course you can use this regular like the Honey Bear one, but as I said, if you've got access to, like for example, this is a wildflower honey, this is a mangrove honey from Florida, so if you've got like lavender honey, I use a lot of that, it's very aromatic, acacia honey, so there's lots of different honeys you can buy. But anyway, so you want needs to be a pourable type of honey, so you want 3 tablespoons of honey, and you're going to use lavender, wildflower, acacia, or clover. And I use a raw and unfiltered. So the honey I generally use is a raw unfiltered honey. All right, so that has sort of more of natural good flavor. And then you can also use in that, or you can use golden syrup. Again, another English product. All right, so this is called golden syrup. So we use this a lot in England in steamed pudding, like treacle pudding. We use this a lot in English baking. And again, this is a really nice product. And again, you can find this now on Amazon or like BritishGrocer.com, other tasteofbritain.com. There are a lot of British sites now. The health foods available, but you know, as I said, you can find these on Amazon. But this is Lyle's golden syrup, and also we use this, as I said, a lot of baking, all right, and for cooking and things as well. And it looks almost like honey, all right, it's just slightly different texture. It's a little bit sort of softer, it's not as sort of thick, but as I said, this is golden syrup, which you can also use this. You can also use agave nectar. You can use cane syrup, all right, so cane syrup is an American syrup. You can use brown rice syrup. And a little tip there is if you spray, when you're using your spoon, if you just put a little bit on your spoon of, like for example, some baking spray, like Pam spray, or you can just rub a little bit of Crisco or oil on that. Where you pour your syrup, it makes it easier to, obviously it won't stick to the actual spoon, all right? And so you put that into the sugar, 1 tablespoon of water, and then we move on to what's going to give it the flavor. Now, I use Nielsen Massey. I'm part of the Nielsen Massey Culinary Council. And Nielsen Massey is, I consider, the best vanilla in the world. This is all I use at my school here in Atlanta. So when we're doing baking at home, when I use this for cooking, because I use some of this with green beans and things like that. But I only use Nielsen Massey products. It is the very best that there is, all right? And this is vanilla bean paste, all right? Again, you can find this online. But as I said, this is pure vanilla bean paste, all right? Madagascar bourbon vanilla. Madagascar is a sort of what I generally use for most of my, for example, cookies, or when I'm doing cakes and things for the actual making of the cake. Now, when I move on to doing things like creme brulee, custards, panna cottas, things like that, I often would use a Tahitian vanilla bean paste. Tahitian vanilla bean paste is a little bit different in that it's a little bit more floral, all right, and has a very nice sort of floral flavor and aroma. And Tahitian is used, as I said, I also would use this like if I was adding, for example, vanilla bean paste to whipped cream, making ice creams and things like that. Most of the time I use Tahitian. So I use both the Madagascar and Tahitian for different, as I said, purposes. But generally for the cookies I'm showing you, I formulated this recipe with the traditional Madagascar vanilla bean. Now, vanilla bean is, as it said, vanilla bean paste. It actually is made with vanilla beans. Now, sadly, a lot of vanilla we buy hasn't even seen a vanilla bean in its life. It's just artificially flavored, and that's going to make a huge, huge difference. Also, using vanilla bean, because you actually have the little vanilla specks in here, when you actually take your dough, you're going to have obviously the sort of like you would on a vanilla bean ice cream or a creme brulee, you're going to get the little tiny, as I said, parts of the seed. It really permeates an amazing flavor, and as I said, totally different than using an extract, all right? So as I said, I generally, most of what I do in baking and things, I use vanilla bean paste, all right? And so this is, as I said, the vanilla bean paste has got the pieces in here. So of course you've got the, let's get this one tightened up. So you, but you'll see that in the dough that I showed you. So I have half a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste. Now vanilla bean paste, for 1 teaspoon of extract you use half a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste. All right, so if you're doing a recipe that calls for a teaspoon of vanilla, you will put half a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste. All right, it's a lot more concentrated, flavor wise it's a lot more potent, so you have obviously used less of it, and that is equivalent to, as I said, to be the same as taking a vanilla bean and scraping it, but this is just so much more convenient because the vanilla bean is suspended in the sort of syrup that's in the product, so it makes it very, very easy to use. Nielsen Massey also do some other amazing products. We'll be talking about their like pure chocolate extract. All right, this is another one I use a lot, lemon pure paste. This is wonderful, for example, for making like a Greek chicken. You can use this for a salad dressing. You can use it brushed on fish. But it's also really good to put in cookie dough for lemon cookies. And in the recipe for the French honey cookies, it also talks about the beginning is of the recipe that this is a vanilla base, but you can add lemon, orange, and lime zest. You could replace 50 grams of the flour with cocoa powder to make a chocolate version. And then you could also add like dried culinary lavender. I love like lavender vanilla combination. So for example, for a bridal luncheon, if you were doing a little like lacy cookies in the CookieCon mold, they would be really nice with lavender in them. And so you can do those for sort of spring and summer, a very nice flavor combination with the cookie. And then, so that's your vanilla bean paste. Then we also have 100 grams of unsalted butter. All right, so this is salted butter. Salted butter. You can also, of course, get unsalted butter. Generally, I use salted butter for most things. I usually only use a European type of butter when I bake. In fact, when I cook and things as well. There are obviously many brands of this available now in the grocery stores, supermarkets, and like Pluger is a very popular brand here in the US. We use that at the French Pastry School where I'm a chef instructor. But also, like for example, this is a Kroger brand. It's a salted French butter. All right, and so obviously the butter fat content is a lot higher. A lot of American regular butter is going to have a lot more water into it, and so you don't get again the same richness when you use this for sauces, when like hollandaise sauce and things like that. But also in baking, it really makes a huge difference. It is a little bit more expensive than regular butter, but I consider it worth it. I mean, growing up in England, we only ate butter, okay? So obviously when my mom made bread and we had fresh bread and baked goods, it was always made with butter, and then we'd have obviously European butter. There are a lot of like brands, like for example, here in the US, you know, if you go into grocery stores like Publix, you know, they also have Kerrygold, which is an Irish butter. They're all Europeans, all right? So the butter fat content by law has to be a certain percentage, and we'll talk more about that in the chocolate recipe. But as I said, it makes a huge difference in your baking. So get your family to do the taste test and you'll be really surprised what a difference, richness it makes to your baked goods, including cookies. All right, and so you're going to take the butter, and so then we have, as I said, 100 grams of salted butter, and then you're just going to be cubed. All right, so you just can take 100 grams, and then you can just obviously just cube that up in smallish cubes and just keep that in the fridge. All right, and or room temperature if it's not too warm, and that will be your French butter. Then you're going to take, as I said, the last ingredient is 265 grams of all-purpose flour, which will need to be sifted. All right. When I do the chocolate recipe, I talk about that. We don't sift the cocoa powder or the flour for the chocolate recipe because it's going to be a little denser. All right. So there's no need to sift your flour for that other recipe. And then so you put the sugar, honey, water, any zest and flavoring, like the lemon compound. So you could use, like for example, like a zest of a lemon, and then also like a quarter or half a teaspoon of the lemon compound from Nielsen Massey. And so that will be, as I said, the paste gives you a really good intense lemon flavor. All right, and it's all natural, so it's going to taste really wonderful. So you're going to put that in. So you're just going to bring it to the to boiling point. So you just sort of put it on medium heat until obviously the sugar melts, and then everything's going to come to boil. You take it off remove the pan from the heat, and then you stir in the cube butter until melted. So you're just going to take your cube butter, put it into the hot mixture until you just stir it until the butter melts. And at that point, then you will then stir in the flour gradually. So that is really where having a sort of a large pan with a fairly large surface area, but also not too deep, makes it a little bit easier. So just going to stir that in with a spatula, a rubber spatula, silicone spatula, and until that mixture. And so you just add a little bit of the flour at a time until that is all, as I said, combined together. And then you're going to scrape it out of the mixing bowl, all right, scrape it out of your saucepan like you would scrape out things from mixing bowls. So just scrape it out from your saucepan onto the table, and then you're just going to work it, knead the dough until smooth, and then you're going to cut the dough in half. All right, so you're going to cut the dough in half. Now this is some I made a couple of weeks ago. Now also with this product, because the fact it has the butter, you know, growing up again in England, we don't refrigerate eggs. And my mom used to, in our pantry, would keep the eggs and the butter and things like that, so we wouldn't refrigerate any of those products. Butter, unless you live in a very sort of warm area, you know, like as I said, it's going to be fine at room temperature. And so this will be keeping, obviously, if you like here in Georgia, Florida, you know, places, of course, most places in the summertime it gets warmer. You can just keep this sort of in somewhere cool. You can refrigerate if you want to, but it's not really necessary because butter is a very shelf-stable product. And so you're just going to wrap that in plastic wrap or press and seal. So you would just wrap it up like this, and then you would just leave that on your counter for about, as I said, you need to leave it on the counter for about an hour to cool down. Then you just preheat your oven to 350, and then you're going to use the product, all right? So you don't have to let it sit or refrigerate for several hours. You can then use that. And then if you're not going to immediately make the cookies, wrap in plastic dough, and you can put it in a zip top bag. So you just wrap it up. And the reason why I divide the recipe into two pieces, two sections, is that then the whole, it will cool, the surface area will cool a little quicker than if you leave it just in one big block, all right? And that will be the product. Now, when we use this, which I will talk about in a moment, when we use this, it's very much like marzipan, if you've ever used European marzipan. As I said, it looks like an almond paste or marzipan. And you can see it's got a nice consistency to it. And you can actually see the little specks of vanilla bean, little specks in the dough, all right? So it's a little bit like pastry, all right? It's as I said, it's got a nice malleability to it. Of course, because the butter is a very rich cookie, all right, so the butter will, as I said, you get a little bit of oil from the butter on your hand there. But as I said, it's a very, very rich cookie. You can use this as a rolled out cookie as well, but as I said, I formulated this specifically, the amount of flour and everything to this in recipe to use in the molds, all right? And as I said, we'll talk about that in a second. So this can be stored in room temperature for several days, you know, week or so will be fine. And as I said, I made this a couple of weeks ago, and it's just been at room temperature. I just have it in the sort of storeroom, which is cooler, like a pantry or a larder, and that will be perfectly okay. But you could put this in the fridge. You could also freeze this as well, so you can freeze this, then take it out, use it, and then refreeze it or refrigerate it. All right, but if you do it in small amounts, that makes it easier to do. Now the next recipe is the rich chocolate recipe, and as you can see, this is a really beautiful chocolate cookie. All right, so really dark chocolate, a nice chocolate. This has a wonderful, wonderful flavor. All right, and as I said, you have the ingredients then. So we've talked about a few of the ingredients, which are very much the same, but this will, as I said, for the dough, we're going to use 180 grams of French European salted butter. And all butter in Europe has 82% butter fat content, all right, and that's what makes it a lot richer, all right. And then we take 215 grams of superfine caster sugar. So this is where I would recommend, because especially when you're using it in molds, like when you're using this in the Katie Sue mold, you see how it goes in and you get all of those beautiful details on the cookie, all right. Now if you use regular granulated sugar, the dough is going to be more gritty, and that also means you're not going to get that much beautiful effect when you put it into a mold, all right? For rolling out the dough, you could use either or when I do the log slices. or when I'm doing, for example, my with the wood grain texture on the pieces here, you can use that with granulated sugar. But as I said, the superfine sugar will make it, especially with some of the more lacy molds and the Katie Sue molds that you might use. All right, so we take, so we have the butter. You have 215 grams of superfine caster sugar, 50 grams of cocoa powder. All right. Then we have a large egg, all right, which will be, a large egg is approximately 54, 55 grams of weight, but just take a large egg. Now, then we take, next thing we have there is a quarter of a teaspoon of instant espresso. And this is, as I said, there are quite several brands you can find again on Amazon or online. But this is espresso instant, so it's like instant coffee, but this is espresso, so very, very strong. Generally, when I make chocolate cookies and when I do a lot of my chocolate cakes, a lot of chocolate desserts, I will use a little espresso powder, not a lot, but that really intensifies the chocolatey flavor. It makes a huge, huge difference if you try a recipe without espresso in and then do some with espresso in, but it really is really good in this dark chocolate, rich chocolate cookie. All right, so I use a quarter of a teaspoon of espresso coffee, and then I take a half a teaspoon of pure chocolate extract. So I'm using here, again, this will really pump up the flavor. This is a Nielsen Massey pure chocolate extract, all right? And again, this is really, really good to use in chocolate cake and chocolate recipes and cookies and things like that. So I use, as I said, a half a teaspoon of that. And then I take a half a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste, all right, and you mix together to dissolve the coffee. So when you take you basically take those, just to add the liquids to the coffee, and that will just dissolve the espresso. Now some people use, obviously you can take espresso, just make an espresso and then use some of that. But again, the powder I find will be a little bit more intense. So the instant espresso is what I would recommend you use for this. All right, and so this together, and then you 310 grams of all-purpose flour, and then there's no need to sieve the cocoa powder or the flour. So you can obviously get everything scaled and do, as we talk in pastry, mise en place, which means everything in place. So have all of your pieces, all of your components ready to go. And then we're going to cream the butter and sugar to light and fluffy on medium to high speed. And then I generally on my KitchenAid mixer would use my paddle with the with the silicone band on it. So that really makes a difference. It means that you can, when you don't have to keep scraping down the bowl, makes it very, very easy when you're mixing up icing. I use that always when I make royal icing, to use my paddle with the silicone blade. That makes a huge, huge difference, but it also makes it easier to, as I said, take the icing out of the bowl, or if you're making a cake, to sort of use that as almost a sort of a spatula to go into your cake pans. Then we're going to add the cocoa powder, mix it on slow speed, add the egg whites, and then you're going to divide in two and wrap in plastic wrap, place in the refrigerator 45 minutes to 1 hour to chill before use. All right, again, this cookie dough doesn't have to actually it doesn't have to rest overnight or anything. And this is the cookie dough, and you can see it's sort of a beautiful dark chocolate color. It smells absolutely amazing because the combination of the espresso powder, the chocolate extract, and also that vanilla bean paste, it sort of really is an amazing combination of flavors. So if you like chocolate, this is a really, really good cookie to use. Now this one can be used for in molds. Also can be used for actually rolling out as well, which I'm going to show you both of those techniques next. So now I'm going to move on to show you how we actually use the molds with the cookie dough that I've described in the first part. So this is the French honey cookie dough, and in your instructions it tells you that when we use the Katie Sue vintage frame mold, we use 50 grams of cookie dough. Now this is the vintage frames, medium size, so this is a perfect size for a cookie. So when you're doing a cookie, it's a really, really perfect size, you can see here. And so for a wedding or things like that, or you could use this even on top of a cake. But as I said, this is an excellent size. Katie Sue also do sell a smaller version of this, which would make obviously a smaller one, and they also do have a large one as well. This is a large one, but you can see it's quite a lot bigger. All right, so this is a perfect size for a cookie. All right, so it would almost be like an oversized cookie. Now there of course are other Katie Sue molds. These is the lace topper. This is the heart topper, and these were originally designed for cupcake toppers, and in fact you can make these as a cookie and then sit down on top of a cupcake, so you get a cupcake and a cookie at the same time. And as I said, these are lovely detailed molds, and they can be used in several different Christmas designs as well in the toppers here. Now and this one here is a pretty rose circle. Again, this is a nice one, sort of again sort of dainty, and then you can of course paint the roses in here, and then there's also some little additional roses there for embellishment as well. So when you're using the medium frame mold, I'm going to use 50 grams. Now, reason why I use scaled weight is when I do cookies, I would always scale my cookie dough when I'm doing it into a mold, because that means it's going to bake at a consistent amount of time, and also the depth. But also if you're selling cookies, for if you have a bakery, it means from your cost control, you know exactly how much it's costing because you have 50 grams of dough. So I'm going to use a small scale. Now this is a baby Ascali scale. There are several brands, but if you just put micro scale or high precision scale, so this will scale actually this particular one here, which is Ascali do a silver version, and this is more like a bronzy colored one. This is a high precision scale. This will only scale up to 500 grams, all right, which is 1.2 pounds. Whereas a regular kitchen scale, you know, usually goes up to 5 kilos or 11 pounds. And they have the small little Ascali silver one will again go up to 5 kilos or 11 pounds. But this is wonderful. I use this all the time for cake, for cookies, for scaling out various things when I do scaled weight. So this will scale 1/10 of a gram. So this is really good. So when I develop recipes for companies, you know, when I'm doing food and wine events and various events, culinary and pastry events all over the world, when I'm formulating recipes, I will often, as I said, use this sometimes when you try a recipe or try something and it's bit too strong, and then you can use this at very, very high precision. So this will actually scale, as you can see when you're using this scale, you see that's like 2 grams, but then it will go 2.1, 2.6 grams. And in the second video, when I show how to make a perfect flooding consistency icing, this is the type of scale I would recommend using, because there I'm going to add 6 grams of water to each 100 grams of royal icing, and that means you have perfect consistency flooding icing every time. So check out my second video on vintage chic when I will be showing how to actually flood the inside of this frame with royal icing, and give you some really wonderful new tips on flooding and obviously using other different methods of flooding cookies. So anyway, when we use this, so I've got here, you can see here, it's just going to go to 50 grams. So this is quite obviously, so with 50 grams, all right, so you scale like if you were making, say, 6 of these or 12 of these, you scale your cookie dough. Just keep that wrapped up and just put that in your bag. And then we're just going to give this dough a little knead. Now this is at room temperature. All right, so this is at room temperature. Now, Katie Sue molds, something else is very important. These are food grade, all right? So these are food grade mold. They will obviously handle high heat, so you can use these for Icing mold, you can use them for chocolate, but they are food grade, and that is a very important thing when you think about cookies and things. So I'm just going to push my cookie dough into this. So very much like a shortbread cookie dough, but it has a little bit more elasticity, so when you're using another Katie Sue mold, so I'm just going to fill that in to the edge and here. So if you watch my video on rustic cookies, this is very much the same technique. So once you've done that, then I'm going to take here an acrylic rectangle. Now when I do, for example, like my log slice, or when I'm doing, say for example like these ones here, I would use a round disc usually, all right, because it's just a little bit more convenient, and just press that on. That helps to give an even back, but also what it does there, it's just going to make sure that pushes that into all of the details. All right, so I'm just going to take that out, just make sure that goes into the corner, just press that onto there. Okay, so that's really the basics of how you fill the mold. Now This is also covered on the rustic cookies. So a couple of things. First of all, I'm using 2 baking sheet pans. All right, so I do that, and I use the sheet pan upside down. All right, so I'm not using it in a traditional way. So I'm using the sheet pan upside down. These are Arlene Charles Chu's perforated mats. All right, these are really a game changer for cookies. They, first of all, are going to give you this beautiful sort of like this sort of cross grain texture, or like almost a burlap on the back of them, so it makes them totally flat, but also means they're going to bake more evenly. And also, if you're going to flood the back or things, you have this very nice texture. As you can see, it's going to give a totally flat back, and you don't end up with air bubbles, which if you don't use these, you'll often get air bubbles directly baking onto silicone or on parchment paper. All right, so these are really wonderful. So what I do here is you can do these. And of course, like this is just a small one, and so you could do that like this way round, or whichever way you want to do there. But if you do one here, you can get 4 of these on a small size one. I'll show you this here. All right, and then all I do is put that onto the mat, and I'm just going to use, you see, and I just peel the mold back, and this comes out there like that. And look at the incredible detail you have on this cookie, but you can see the little specks of vanilla into there. All right. And that would be how you would do the molds. Now, also you can use, for example, the dough here. So you can use that on other types of molds. So, for example, things like my pine cones with the chocolate cookie dough, you can put that in. You could also use, for example, like this little one here, this little. You see, like this is a little cookie rose. That would be nice, for example, on for a bridal lunch, or when you serve like for a bridal lunch for tea or coffee, you can make these little cookies. This has been done in the same way. So again, that's done in the silicone mold, and so you can just take those and remove those. And but as I said, so there's lots of different molds. So the Katie Sue range is pretty immense, and so there's a lot of the ones you can use. That is actually the little rose mold. So this is the Katie Sue mold there. And when you're using the small molds like this, I will show you this after I've shown you the wood grain part. You can just press the paste into there, so you don't have to scale that. And then using your little flexi scraper, you just scrape off the excess dough, and you will put that out onto your baking mat. And then you can also use the instructions like in my Flour Pro book, where you use a size guide. So sometimes I scale the cookie dough like I've just done for this to get a more consistent thickness. When I do, sometimes I use the size guide, and sometimes I just fill the mold and scrape off the excess. All right, so it depends really on what elements you're doing with the particular mold. But that is how you would use the mold. Now this is going to go in a 350 oven. All right, so it talks in your recipes about you're going to bake the cookies 350 for about 9 minutes for the medium frame. So I found both the vanilla cookie and the chocolate cookie about 9 minutes for the medium frame. Don't over bake these. And then if you're doing, for example, then you're going to use for the other cookies do 7 to 8 minutes. So if you're doing the wood grain, which I'm going to show you next, or if you're doing like the little roses, I've just shown you there. If you were doing the ones here, all right, so if you're doing the vanilla cookie like that, so of course this one is baked, this is unbaked, but if you're doing that in the cupcake topper, and then in your instructions there, so when you do the lace and heart topper, that would be 40 grams, all right. So if I was going to do the lace topper here, that would be 40 grams of dough, either the chocolate good dough or the vanilla one, all right. And again, you're going to just put that on, and then you just would use a tab and just pull that back, and makes it very easy to release, all right. And then of course when you're doing rollout cookies, I'm generally going to bake those about 7 to 8 minutes, but of course every oven varies a little bit, so you might need to just adjust that based on your oven temperature. So when I come back, I'm going to show you how to do the next effect, which is going to be how to do a sort of a wood grain, and what I've used here, where you can actually do sort of like a wood panel. This is really nice again for when we're doing, for example, some of the, when we're making the succulents. So with the succulents here, so doing this, for example, this beautiful succulent cookie there, that is done with the wood grain. I'm going to show you that with the cookie dough. So moving on next to the wood grain panels, this is a nice way to sort of use especially succulents, like a planter, like a wooden planter, but it would work well for Easter. You could do this with little eggs and bunnies in. So there's lots and lots of options here of how you could do this. So what I've done in your instructions for wood panels, we roll out some cookie dough 1/4 inch, approximately 6 millimeters. So I'm using obviously cookie sticks here, or pieces of wood, molding. So this is about approximately 1/4 inch, about 6 millimeters deep. And so once we've rolled this out, now generally when I do this, I've just shown you this on a smaller scale. I would use a larger rolling pin and obviously a larger silicone mat, but I've just rolled this out with the sticks on the side here. So you're just going to cut out your pieces. Now I'm going to use the wood panel piece. So I'm going to use the wood panel. This is a really nice Katie Sue mold to make it a little bit more contemporary and modern, rather than doing like a wood fence where you would use it with these pieces vertical. I'm going to do it with the mat horizontal, and then I will use my press. You see, this is a good way. So when you're ever using any of the Katie Sue mats like this, you can use this, and then they'll come off your cookie dough, and of course it will actually stay stuck to the acrylic, so you could do that several times on your piece. But you see how you get this really nice wood grain. So what I'm going to do is cut that. Now I based this cookie on as I said, a 3-inch, 7.5 centimeter square. All right, so I've got the cookie cutter here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just cut the cookie dough. Going to take the excess paste off here. You can use your little scraper here as well. Now of course I'm going to actually cut this, so I'm going to use my little scraper, but of course you could roll out more cookie dough, and then you could use this for several, like cut 4 or 6 out at a time. This has a wonderful smell, the chocolate aroma, and this is quite amazing. So here I've got my panel, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a 3-inch square, or smaller or larger, and then press and pull using a metal serrated scraper. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create this sort of almost this sort of rough edge onto here, so you get this sort of cut edge onto that. And how I found worked really well to do this, so I'm going to use a metal cake scraper. This is comb scraper, is used for royal icing, for decorating cakes, and also, for example, for buttercream work. A lot of bakeries use this for the buttercream on a bûche de Noël, the Yule log. And so what I'm going to do here, and I'm going to do this on, just going to take the little teeth down there, just press that on, and I'm just going to pull that, and you see how then you're going to get that sort of raw, sort of nap cut edge there. All right, so you can sort of see you get that nice sort of raw edge. And I'm just going to do this on the 2. So just press down and just sort of pull away like this. So you just cut that, and then you're going to just take the cookie, and then this will go into your baking sheet, because then next I'm going to show you how we do the sort of the wash of color onto this, the sort of vintage look. So that will give you the sort of the shape of your cookie. And then you can also use, for example, when I did the planter, so I've actually used a few Anne Clark cookie cutters. This is a cutter, it's a Topiary that Anne Clark designed for me a few years ago when we had CookieCon in Indianapolis. And this was, as I said, sort of we used for the cookies. Sorry, not in Kentucky. So this was, as I said, the Topiary, and you can use this as a planter. You can do a Topiary for Christmas time and all sorts of times of year. So we're going to use the same technique here. So I'm just going to roll this out. Just going to press that on the top. This also makes it easier with your distribution of weight on your top there. Of course, you will get like an oily residue on there, so you just use a little bit of dish soap. But Katie Sue molds can also go in the dishwasher as well. But so then you're going to take that, and all I'm going to do here is I'm going to use this to make the planter here. So I'm just going to cut that. Okay, just going to take off my excess. And then for the, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to cut that just a little bit taller. So just going to do it sort of, so you can make it taller, but you could fill this with like evergreens. There's all sorts of things you could do in the fall. You could do this with pumpkins in, it's all sorts of types of, so here I'm just going to come up to about here. I'm just going to cut that off here. And you can see how you've got, so there you see how you've got your, and that's what I used for the, so for here, for this one, all right? And so I've used this an extension, and that actually is what we will support all the succulents on, which you're going to see in the second video when we talk about this. So this will go onto your baking sheet. So this will go into my baking sheet, and that will be ready for the, so that will be sort of how we would create the cookies. And as I explained, when we, you know, so obviously the frame we use actually scaled weight, and then with the cookie I've just shown you, the wood panel, we've just used rolled out some paste of your choice amount of what you want to do, how many cookies you're going to have to make. And then when you're, for example, doing like, this is my Flour Pro Book 4, which we had for sale at CookieCon in Orlando and CookieCon in Dallas. And when I designed Flour Pro, I use a size guide. So there is actually a size guide in the back of the book, but what that is it sort of actually will sort of help you in understanding the sort of the sizes. But it sort of goes through obviously everything made in here, the antlers and things are done in actual using a size guide. So this is a size guide. So if, for example, you were going to use my pine cone, this is the Pinecone Mold. Now this makes a really nice for a decoration on a cookie or for a small cookie. For example, again, to serve with coffee or tea or hot chocolate, you can make little pinecone cookies. So in you're using a pinecone for the large pinecone, I use number 11 size. So in your size guide, so that means you make an 11 ball. So you have about a third below, 2/3 above. And if you watch any of my Flour Pro videos. Now, when you're using a mold for the first time, like, and some of the molds are a little bit more intricate, like for example the lace and the heart shaped one, if you find your cookie dough is sticking, usually it's just because it's like making an omelette or a pancake. That first one is sometimes going to stick, but once you get the oil from the butter into the mold, but what you can do is just use just a brush, and I'm just going to put a little bit of vegetable shortening fat into here. Just a little tiny bit, that will help. All right, and so you're just going to just press your, so you see you're just going to press your paste into there, and then you're going to use your little flexi scraper. So with your flexi scraper, you're just going to just level that out. So this works really well for pressing the dough into some of the smaller molds, all right, like the rose one that I showed you a little while ago. All right, and then you can just take your, and you see this is going to give you a beautiful pine cone, a chocolate pine cone. Of course, you could do this in gingerbread as well. And I'm going to put that on my baking sheet. And then next I'm going to talk about how we do the whitewash using metallics and colors. So now we're going to move on to embellish the frames and also the wood panel. I'm going to show you some painting techniques. So in your instructions, it says that you're going to paint whitewash lightly over the cookies using either, you can use semi cakes. This is a base white, the semi color splash, which I showed on the rustic cookies, because what I did there is I used some of this and added some autumn gold powder color to make this nice natural tree trunk looking, and I used a little bit of brown to paint around the edge. All right, so on my rustic cookies I show this product. All right, so this can be used, and so this is like almost a thick paint. Also, you can use this product here. This is Caram Portoleo for sugaring. This is an artist oil paint, edible oil paint. A lot of cookie artists have been using these over the last couple of years. Absolutely incredible for painting cookies, and they come in different colors. And when using the the Simi's Color Splash and Karen's paints. Like for example, when you buy the Color Splash, it comes a dilution solution, so this makes it watery. And then also with Karen, for using these, for example, for painting on cookies, like if you had a black flooded cookie, royal icing cookie, and you're going to paint white detail, Karen uses these diluter, slow drying and a fast drying. So if you're doing things that you want to obviously be able to sort of build on the layers of color, like a painting or whatever on a cookie, you can use the fast one. The slow one is going to give you a little bit more time. So different techniques you do, and Karen Portaleo, you can watch a lot of videos she has done using this product. So this is diluters, but when I do this, I just actually use water. So I take water, you can use a little needle tip applicator with some water in. You can also use a little spray bottle, so just use a little travel spray bottle. That gives a little bit of water into there. And so the oil paints are a little thicker. All right, so you just put a little bit of that onto a dish, and again, but the same sort of effect. And you can also use white powder. So you can use white powder color or dusting powder, and you can use a little bit of that, because then you're going to add water to the liquid, the paint, or obviously the powder. So here you're just going to take, I said, a little bit of, you can just add a little bit of water to this, and then going to just kind of mix this up. Now you can go, we're looking for a sort of like a whitewash. If you think about shabby chic, where you would take paints and chalk paint or paint and acrylic paint on crafts and things, and then you would build that. So you can sort of make it quite watery, you can make it a little bit thicker. It depends on what look you're going for. And you can do different sort of, obviously it looks paint effects on there. So when you are doing this onto your cookies here, so just showing you on the cookie, I'm just going to put this up here. So I'm going to use like a, and you do this before you bake the cookies, all right? So you see how I'm just going over with a brush. I'm using a flat brush. Now because of the oil in the butter, you're going to get a little bit of, it repels a little bit, but you're just going to do that sort of, but you're just going to do that all over. You can put some slightly darker sort of highlights in that, but this will be done before it bakes. That's very important. All right, and then you can also do this effect. You can do this with also with metallics. Now I'm using here edible paints. So these are, like for example, the Rainbow Dust edible food paints. So this is a sort of like a pearl. And see, so for example, on this vanilla cookie, this was done with pearl paint. So I painted over with pearl. This one was done with the white, exactly the same as I have just done. So you can do different things. And then also you can do on the third video, which I have called Jungle Chic, I'm going to be showing you some different ideas for like jungle themed cookies. So this one has got little plumeria and the monstera leaves. And so again, like gold metallic. So if you are doing, for example, like an oil painting to go in side of here, then you of course could do a gold frame, or you could do a silver frame. So there's lots and lots of different effects you can create there. And so you're going to use the, so when you take the, for example, the pearl paint, so this is some of the Rainbow Dust pearl. So this is going to give you a pearlescent look. And again, you're going to then take your cookie. And here, of course, this looks, when you do this on a chocolate cookie, it looks really, really nice. But you're just going to paint this over the top here. So this is with the pearl paint. So this is totally edible, all right? So that's a very important part here, you know, when you're using metallics. But these bake really, really well. So I would then just go over the cookie. I'm using a flat brush. I'm just going to go over this cookie. So when I did the, for example, like the gold frame, I did that, of course, on the chocolate cookie. Just brush around the edge there just to make sure that that cuts all of that detail. This will give you this sort of pearlescent look into that. So it looks really nice. That would also be nice when you do things like, for example, the pine cones. So you would just paint those over the pine cones, and that will give that sort of wintry look to the pine cones before they're baked. And of course you can do the different sort of colors. So you see the cookie, this is on a chocolate, this is on actually a gingerbread cookie, but you see I did a gingerbread base, and then I then painted the gold on the top of that. So you know, you get different looks. Now also you can use this technique here. Shows you other ideas. You can also paint like flooding icing. So this is done with the white gel and the water, but also if you take just like white flooding icing and you actually then you just brush that sort of fairly watery, just like you'd flood, paint on the top, you're going to get that sugar, and then you bake it. And what happens is the royal icing is going to set the royal icing, but it's going to give you that nice sugary shell, a little bit like on some German cookies and things. And so you can also paint that with flooding consistency royal icing, and then you would bake that. All right, so this could be, of course, then left plain. So you have lots of different choices here. So you can see you can do the cookie, obviously just baked is going to look like this. All right, and so I'm going to put these in the oven now. So these are going at 350. So we'll put these in for, now of course I've got like, these are going to take a little longer, about approximately 9 minutes, and this will be 7 to 8 minutes. So I'm going to transfer this one onto another baking sheet, a mat, and bake these, and then I'm going to show you what they look like when they come out of the oven. So the cookies have just come out the oven, and as I said, I've adjusted them because of obviously this one took about 9 minutes and these one about 7 to 8 minutes. And well, as soon as this one comes out the oven, the frame, just if there are any sometimes little air bubbles in the cookie dough, you can use, this is a tart tamper used for tart shells. So you could use that, just go over the surface of this. But actually what I found worked really well is I've just used the cookie cutter. So this is just and I'm just going to sort of press that on there. So that just sort of gives a level base there, because if you are going to use like an edible image or things like that, it just gives a level surface to attach that to. And so then of course you would take these, put them onto a cooling rack once they've cooled a little bit, and then we'll be moving on to as I said, the next stage of those, which is going to be flooding them. And then also you can use this technique of the painting. You could also use, for example, like trend colors, like for example, Pantone color of 2022 is this color here, which is called Very Peri, which is periwinkle blue. And you can see my dusting powder, my powder color I have, the periwinkle, is exact match to this. All right, so you could, for example, if you wanted to, you can do this just with water. So you could take the periwinkle and then just add water to that and brush that over, for example, a chocolate cookie or the vanilla cookie or gingerbread cookie. And also you can take a little bit of, you can do this also into the white to make it more opaque. So then you can also use this for painting. So you could take this blue, and that's actually the technique I've used on the cookies here. So you can see I've actually taken, this is the heart lace one I did in gingerbread cookie, and then I went over the top of that with like a blue wash. And you can see here, this Mother's Day cookie I did with a periwinkle blue hydrangea. I've done this on top of the chocolate or the gingerbread, and I've just painted that sort of over the top of that. So you would do that prior to baking. Now remember, doing this prior to baking means that it's going to bake. It's going to then mean that it's not going to be wet, and it's going to dry everything off. So it really is the better way to go when you're doing that technique. Now in video number 2, all right, which is going to be, the title of that is going to be Vintage Cheek. That is going to be showing you how to take, I'm going to talk about royal icing, I'm going to talk about flooding the actual inside, as you can see here on this wedding cookie. I'm going to show you how I actually flood that. I'm going to use some slightly new techniques that some of you may not have seen, using a syringe and things like that to get consistent amount of icing into there. But you can see here that when you are doing this is the pearl on top of the vanilla, and this is white on top of the chocolate, so you get really, really pretty effects. So whether you're doing these for a wedding or for Christmas, for the holidays, get some lovely, lovely techniques with the painting before you bake these. So I hope you've enjoyed this first video, and will join me in video number 2 and then video number 3 as I show you some other fun things to do from CookieCon 2022 in Reno. See you soon, sweet wishes!